Welcome back. As usual, if you can turn on your cameras, could be great. Announcements first. Number one, today you have a quiz. Quiz number 5 is going to open at the end of the lecture, and you have until midnight today to submit. So please, you have a quiz to complete tonight. Second, we talked about this before. Next week, your midterm exam, 25% of your grade. Hopefully you start reviewing things and you're getting ready for the midterm. Please remember, any question that you could have, any super tutorial that you review online and it's different from whatever we covered during a lecture, this week is your opportunity to ask questions. After the exam, nothing to do about it. So any questions that you could have this week, please, during the lecture or send us an email. I received this question also. If you cannot access your quizzes, send an email to the TA. They can open the quizzes for you. And yes, the quiz that is due tonight is part of the things that are going to be in your exam. So complete the quiz today. You are not going to be able to check the correct answers until after the due date. So for the quiz that is due today, probably you are going to have access to the answers and the feedback by tomorrow. So you need to wait for that one. I am going to talk more about the exam in our next lecture, but yes, it's going to be on Canvas. We're going to use a proctoring software. You are going to be recorded, your faces, your audio, and quiz. The exam is going to be mostly multiple choice questions, but some open questions, mostly about programming. So I am going to show you examples, but yes, your exam is on Canvas online. You do not need to go to the class. I am going to talk about the final. And right now, your midterm next week, March 11. I am going to do a full review March 9. And for the final, some people ask me about it. Right now, my plan is to run your final during our last lecture. So our last meeting is April 22. That is the last lecture before the week of exams. So hopefully we can do the final exam that day. Final exam and the midterm both are 75 minutes. You have basically 1 hour for the exam and you have 15 minutes to do all the setup and the configuration and the picture and showing your IDs and all this process for the proctoring. So the exams, 1 hour, good enough for you to finish. Multiple choice and open questions is programming, usually very small programs. If you start writing a long program, probably that is the incorrect answer. So 1 hour. If you can put in your agenda, March 11 and April 22, our midterm and the final. And remember, 25% each. So review the lectures, review the slides. Any question, ask before the exam. Do not wait after you receive a grade to submit a piece. Good? Any question? Perfect. Okay, the quiz today, the midterm, the final, you have the dates. Now, also, assignment. I share with you requirements for an assignment. So far, the only thing that I asked you is to do your product backlog. The first thing that I wanted is for you to understand the requirements. Be sure that the requirement was clear. Now, hopefully, after the 2 previous activities, submit your product backlog, review the product backlog of others. Hopefully, by today, you have a very clear idea of the stories, the requirements involved in the assignment. Moreover, if you have a clear idea of the stories, the requirements, the next step is that you can split those in tasks and work on them, work to create the product. So I am going to ask you to do the following. I am going to give you 2 weeks. It's a very easy piece of software. I am going to work with you in the software, so don't worry. But it's a very simple piece of software. I am going to give you 2 weeks. I am going to ask you to run 1 sprint per week. Basically, I want you to work 1 week, report results, work another week to complete the project, and report the final product, the application as I described weeks ago. I am asking you to start working in the assignment. Today, I am going to share with you some ideas. But if you start working in the assignment, I am asking you to complete 1 sprint by March 9, 1 week. And I am asking you to complete a second one by March 16. I am expecting the final product on March 16, and I am expecting the result of whatever you achieve in your first sprint by March 9. So I am asking for 2 submissions, to be clear. And you're going to have those links on Canvas. So due date, March 9, 1 submission. Due date, March 16, the second submission. Submissions that include those 6 elements. I am asking that this day you submit your sprint backlog, those items that you took from the product backlog, but you decide to work during the week, your burden chart, how your team move forward day by day, completing story points or hours, whatever you choose to plot, your retrospective and your review of the sprint. You did that before. And now I am asking you for the product. The product, I need 2 things. The product, obviously, the source code, your project. As usual, our expectation is whatever you submit is compiling and running. March 9, Professor, we submit, but what we submit is not going to compile because it's not complete yet. That is not agile. Remember, by the end of the sprint, you have a product that is ready to be delivered, to be shown to the customer. So source code should be able to compile and run. Obviously, this one should run and have all the specifications. This one, whatever you have in that first sprint. Obviously, it should match somehow with what you are sharing in your charts and your other documents, right? So 2 submissions, the last one, everything, every functionality. The first one, we want to review what you do. Hopefully, yes, I answered that question before. The TAs are working on that. I am going to give you some feedback today, but grades, they are working. Well, remember, your grades are important, yeah. But at this point, if you submit 1 assignment and after you review what others submit, you should have a pretty good idea if you understand or not stories. You should have a very good idea if your submission was correct or not. If right now you submit something that is very different to what others submit, and you still have the question about which one is correct, mine or the other, send us an email and ask. Do not wait for receiving your grade and your grade be high or low. If you have questions, ask. The grades, hopefully, basically are going to show what you already know. You already should know if your submission is more or less okay or not. Not only for the feedback that we have been sharing, but for what you review in others. And hopefully you can review the book, the lectures, or again, send us an email and ask for whatever question you should have. Do not wait for the grades. Good? Okay, so I am asking you for submit this 2 times, and that is going to be your assignment 5. Both submissions, 2 submissions. Please do not forget 2 submissions. You miss one, 50% of your grade. Now, talking about this, the project. This is your project. Basically, I am asking you to create this. I talk for an hour about this project. I describe all the elements, the technical elements, and the behaviors or functionalities here. I ask you to create the stories. I ask you to put my specifications as requirements, stories. And something that we can do right now is to talk about those stories, to talk about those specifications. +1s for what? I was pretty sure that I will have that question. Guys, the only reason because I am giving you 2 sprints is because the exam. Without the exam, this could be a 1-week sprint. So I am giving you 2 just because the exam. And I am okay with whatever you submit here just because it's days before the exam. So 2 sprints. I know that you have the exam on the 11th. It's a very simple assignment. If I ask you to do this individually, probably you need the 2 weeks. But working with a team, the only reason because you could need more time is because integration. And if you need more time because integration, is because we have problem understanding the stories or we have problem doing a good design. And those are the 2 things that I am covering today in the lecture. So don't worry, you can finish this in less than a week. And hopefully what I am going to show you help to that. It's not going to make any difference with your exam. Good. On the opposite, hopefully can help you to study for the exam. Work with your team and agree on things. So moving forward, number 1, this is the project, and the first thing that we need to do, both for the product and for the team, is to split things, is to separate this in different parts. Why? Because we want different programmers working in different things, but also because in the source code, it's easy to read several classes, each of them working in one particular concern, functionality, service, instead of having one class with one main and everything there. Doing a good design, split the problem in different parts and connecting them is good for the management of the project, but also is good for the product. 2 things. When you are doing Agile, you can work several different sprints, several different iterations, but if you do not have a good split of your tasks, if you do not understand what you are going to do, probably in something like this, you can be working this project for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, or you can finish in 1 week. The difference is not start programming. The difference is before I start doing something, understand what we are going to do and what is the best way to split. So I cannot move another week because we have another project running. Remember, each of your classes ask for 10 hours, 3 credits, 10 hours per week. Hopefully, if any class is asking for more than 10 hours, you can talk with that instructor. I think I am not going to ask you for more than 10 hours. Hopefully, at the end, when I finish with the presentation of how to split this, you are going to understand better than your project is something that you can finish quickly in a couple of hours. Again, the main reason because we ask for more time is because we think that something is complex. And we think that something is complex if that something have a lot of elements or a lot of connections. So in order to estimate the time, the first thing that we need to be sure that we understand is how many elements we have and how many connections. And remember, you are a team of 5. So it's a lot of people there. Even if we have 5 elements, each team member is going to do only 1. The number of elements is not a problem. The problem is that we are worried about the connections. And the connections is something that we need to define before we start working. And the design is going to help us to do that. So that is something that I want to mention. Let's see. We remember this, what we need to do. The first thing that you need to do, the reason because you create stories is because you need to figure out the big picture. You need to figure out the big picture, and I am talking about packages, classes, relationships, and your tasks are basically connected with each task is something that is going to happen inside of one file, inside of one class, one method. It's something that one of you is going to do, and that something should be independent of whatever others are doing. So one of you can finish your part of the project in one day, and the others can start 2 or 3 days later, if that is something that someone wants to do. When you split your tasks, independency is something that you define from the stories. It's something that should be also in the design and in the code. Step number 1 for that. Step number 1, you can call it as you want. Modularization or separation of concerns. Separate. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is when you separate, when you create modules or packages, when you think about concerns, in some point, you are going to need to integrate. And this is sometimes more complex than this. In fact, when you do testing for the functionality, for whatever your elements are doing, but this is the next level of testing. That the things work when you connect them. Connecting the parts is something that you need to consider before you start working. Now, thinking about your assignment. For your assignment, separation of concerns. Can you help me? Which are the concerns in your project? What is the meaning of this separation of concerns? Separate things. Which things? Concerns. What is that? Any idea? Nothing. MVC is one way to do this, is a pattern for the architecture. Which are your concerns? What is the meaning of concerns? What is the meaning of that word in software? developing. Classes. Dependency between what? Responsibilities. Okay. Separation of concerns. Separate responsibilities. Responsibilities. There is any relationship between responsibility and the stories that I asked you to do before? Any relationship or connection between responsibility and story? Moreover, there is any connection between responsibility and functional requirement? Looks familiar? Let me ask different. Which are the concerns, the stories, the responsibilities, the requirements that I asked you to implement for your assignment? What things do you need to do in order to complete the assignment? In this point, hopefully I am going to help you with your question about your grade for your homework. I am pretty sure that the first thing that you did after I finished introducing your assignment was to think about the storyboarding of the assignment. What happened in the assignment? From the beginning to the end, all the different stories, events, connections, what if for the product. Tell me, what is the first thing that happened in the storyboard for your assignment? What is the first thing that should happen when, as a user, I am going to run your application? Well, those are my stories. Yes, it's going to be draw, drag, save, load, compile. That is kind of a list of the main requirements. In the story, which one is going to happen first? What is the first thing that you should do in order to start with the project? Any idea? Yeah. You mentioned draw things. That is a word that you use on the screen. The graphical user interface. That is the technical word, but I am sure that we are talking about the same. You are mentioning the frame. Well, identify the classes is what is going to happen right now. But in terms of the storyboard, we don't care about the technicalities. We care about what is going to happen in this software. What is the story that this software can share? The software is going to born and what is going to happen. And then this software have a life cycle, and during the life cycle, what the user can do with the software and how the software is going to respond. The first thing that is going to happen in this software and in many others is you run the software and you should have on the screen a graphical user interface. That is the technical point of view. The story, the things that you have as a user, I want to. What do you want as a user? What is your first story? We need to talk about the data later, yeah. But story number one, the first thing that happened, I like this word, draw. As a user, I want to have access to some icons and a working eye. It's not what you want as a user. You want to have access You want to view, you want to have, use whatever verb you want. But as a user, I want my icons and I want my working area. It's the first thing that you want. It's one of your stories. As a user, you want that. What are you going to do with that? And what is going to happen? There are going to be more stories, a lot of more. But the first thing that you want as a user is your icons and your working area. We talk about these icons and about this space to work. You want that. See the workspace, see the icons. Again, the verb that you use, your choice. But as a user, you want to see, to have, put a verb there. But you want align the verb. And it's all about your icons and your working area. That is what you want. Story number one. For that story, can you help me about the programming of that? Again, stories, you want the icons. Stories, you want the working area. Stories, you want access to different functionalities, the menu. You want moving from stories and going to technicalities. From a technical point of view, you want the graphical user interface. Again, the graphical user interface is a technicality. It's not something that you put as a story. The stories is all about access to the icons, access to the workspace, access to some kind of menu for selecting actions. Menu is not technicality. Menu is a menu. You go to a restaurant and you have a menu. Yay, menu is different story. Technically, you want your graphical user interface. Tell me, how many classes for the graphical user interface? How the diagram for the classes look like? How many people do you need in order to create this graphical user interface? How many hours do you need as a developer? How many people? Hopefully, you agree with me that doing that graphical user interface and accomplishing these three stories that I mentioned before, the access to the options, the icons, the working area, those three stories, and therefore the task connected with them, is something that probably, for sure, one developer, one of you can create. And given your experience, I am sure that you can finish in one day. My expectation. One person, 3 to 4 classes, I could agree with that. Really, Professor? Yeah, by now, hopefully you know that the only thing that you need to do probably is to create a class main. And that one is going to be the one that have the frame. Inheritance is the best connection between them. And that one is going to have these panels. It's going to have the panels. The panels do not need to be global variables. Hopefully by now we agreed that those panels are going to be local variables in the constructor of main. And therefore, the relationship that you're going to have with those classes association and those classes, well, they are going to inherit from panels. So panel. A lot of source code is going to be related with make the panels look pretty, a border, and maybe organize this panel a little bit smaller, this one here, maybe using border layout with this east, the center details. But having two panels is just these two classes and added. Now, two panels. What I am going to do inside of those panels? Which is the most important method that you are going to be using from the panels? What is going to happen in those two panels, in both of them? Any idea? Well, we need to talk about the drag and drop, but in order to implement the drag and drop, what you are going to do is to draw something in the panels. Think about it. The drag and drop is just this idea of a combination of drawing things and the mouse listeners. That is drag and drop. What you need to do, and we are talking about the beginning of the storyboard, we're talking about the beginning of the first 3 stories that we review. What I need to do, the only thing that I care as a developer right now with these first 3 stories, I need to draw something. In one panel, I need to draw the icons. And in the second one, nothing. Later, something is going to be drawn there. But for me, right now, I can start with something empty. What do you do in order to draw something inside of a panel? That is the problem that you need to solve, right? Draw something inside of the panel. What can I do to draw something inside of the panel? Something, a rectangle, a triangle, a circle. Later, we can be worried about the particular shapes that we're using. But in order to draw something inside of a panel, yes, we have a method that is paint. Well, in particular, with panel and using swing, what we have is a method paint component. That is what we have. AWT, we have paint. Swing, paint component. In this class and in this class, both, just by inheriting from JPanel, you get a method, paint component, that you can override, and inside, you can draw things. Really? Yeah, really. You have a paint component method. That paint component method receive a parameter. And inside of the method, I can use that parameter to draw a rectangle. I need to pass 4 parameters, or I can do that parameters to draw a circle, or I can use that parameter to draw a string. So if I create a panel, if I have a class and I inherit JPanel, and I put a method inside paint component with this parameter graphics, whatever name I want to use, usually you're going to have the G. Then I can use that object and call these methods, and I am going to be able to draw things inside of the panel. Yes. Who is going to call that method? Who is going to send me the parameter graphics? Do we care? And hopefully the answer is no. Who is going to call it? This main, the frame. Why? Because when you do set visible true in the frame is going to draw all the panels. And if you add these 2 guys to your main, whatever you put in the paint component is going to be drawn on the screen. The only thing that you need to do is this inheritance from panel, and then you have this paint component, and someone is going to call this method. You really don't care who, but it's going to be your class that inherit from JFrame. And inside you can draw whatever you want using this parameter, the G or whatever name you use, and the draw methods that you have access. You can draw your rectangles, your circles, whatever, you can create your icons. This could be very helpful for the version 1 of the left panel. For the version 2, and also for the right panel. Here, we need to do something. We need to do something because, well, to be honest, we can put this here in the paint component. But then, what is going to happen in the paint component for the panel in the right part? At the beginning, it's going to be empty. But later, it's going to have several different icons. Every single icon that we drag and drop. Tell me, for this one, for the working area, what could be the best way to handle a panel, a space in which you are going to be adding elements? Yes, by drag and drop. But right now, we don't care that it's going to be by drag and drop. The idea is you're going to be adding elements. How do we handle this idea of adding elements and also having to draw them on the screen? By the way, that is another story that hopefully you create in your storyboard. After you have the initial idea, the next thing that you want to do, the next thing in this storyboard is, I want to add elements in the working area. If you want to mention the drag and drop, it's fine. But what you want to do is add elements in the working area. How do you handle that? Moving down to the technicalities. Working area is going to have some kind of relationship with these elements that we want to add. What do we do? We're going to use observer later, but tell me, if you have this working area or whatever name you want to use, and you're going to add something, do you need a data structure? Do you need some way, a place in which you are going to add things somehow? And hopefully the answer is yes, that is what we need. A vector or a list. Guys, all these things that we create and I am talking about the things that we have in red. It's what you mentioned as your graphical user interface. It's what you mentioned as your view with model view controller, if you're familiar with that. All that is related with these three stories that we mentioned about what we want to have on the screen. But now we move to a different one. I want to add elements in the working area. Another story. And we go down to the technicalities, and the technicalities is if you want to add things, you need a data structure. You mention a vector or a list. And you know what? You're going to have a vector or a list in this class. In one of the panels, you want a vector or a list. A vector or a list of what? Probably could be a good moment to introduce a class that represents those pictures that you want to create. A linked list of icons. Okay, a linked list of icons. Somehow, we are going to add icons to the working area. I do not care yet about how. It's going to be with drag and drop. But right now, I don't care about the adding. I care about the drawing. How to draw those elements in the working area. And you know what? It's a very good moment to start with our class workspace. My class workspace. according with what you mentioned, something that I want to need is a list. And that list is going to have icons. Okay, you know what? Then my problem is that here I have a method. My method is this paint component. Is the method that gives me access to graphics. And the problem is that this guy needs to draw on the screen all the elements that somehow are in that list. Can we agree that that is the problem? There is a method that is able to draw things, and the things that I want to draw are these things, icons, that somehow are going to be inserted in this data structure. Both options are okay. In this particular scenario, remember, the vectors are going to increase the size in some kind of size times. The linked list is going to increase by 1. I don't know, both could work. What can I do if I am the responsible of the drawing and I have no idea about how many icons it's going to be or where? Someone else, maybe another programmer, is going to work in this class icon, and someone else is going to work in whether or not the icon can be in a particular position. But my responsibility is the graphical user interface. My responsibility is to put in the working area all the icons that are in the data structure. What happened in order for them to be in the data structure, I don't care. What can I do? What could be my paint component method if I need to draw the icons? Well, let me tell you this. Those events that you're mentioning, the update or the drop, the only thing that they need to do in order to keep consistency is a repaint. Whatever you are using, detecting the drop event, an update from some observer, the only thing is those methods are need to do a repaint. The method that is going to be responsible for put the icon on the screen should be this one, the one that is drawing. And you know what? The only thing that this method needs to do in order to be consistent is a loop. A loop. For each of the elements in the list, call a method. Which method? Let's call it drop. I have a list of icons. If an event occurs, those events are going to call repaint. I am the method paint. The only thing that I do as a paint is every time that for some reason, whatever reason, something needs to be repainted on the screen, I am going to repaint all the icons. That means I am going to do a traversal in the list. And for each of the objects there, I am going to ask those objects to draw it says. The only thing that I need to do is to call a particular method in the particular class. And well, those guys are going to need something that I have. What do I have? This object. That is the only thing that you need, 3 lines in the paint component for the working area. And something like this could be your paint component for the other panel. Really? So this method draw should be very, very complex. I need a class. I need a class icon. My class icon is going to have, as you mentioned, variables for the coordinates of the icon. Probably it's going to have also a type for the icon. What are you going to do to handle the types? Up to you. Constants maybe, or an enumeration. It's programming, but we need a type. Or maybe use subclasses, another idea. The important thing is one method that I need in this class is this method draw that I use above. And this method draw is going to receive as a parameter this graphic. I need to be public because it's going to be used, void. I am going to be able to use this G here. Yeah, you're going to pass that one as a parameter here. The frame is going to call this pane. This pane is going to call this draw. This draw is the draw inside of the icon. I am putting the responsibility of show yourself in the icon. Can you imagine what are you going to have there? It looks like all the icons somehow have a rectangle. And it looks like the rectangle is going to be in a particular position that is going to be there. Which are going to be the values for X and Y? I do not know, but probably those values is something that I am going to change in your update or on release or whatever you are using to handle the drag and drop. Mouse listener. In the particular position, you're going to draw your icon. Your icon have a particular size. You can use numbers and you can use constants. The important thing, guys, is the responsibility of the frame is one. The responsibility of the panel is different. The responsibility of the icon is another one. The responsibility of drawing the details of the icon in the icon. The responsibility of drawing all the icons in the panel. The responsibility of creating a frame and having inside the two panels and those kind of things in the frame. 3 different elements with perfectly well-defined responsibilities and connections. Between the main and the working area, association. Between the working area and the icons, an aggregation. An aggregation just because I have this variable here. And remember, when you have the variable, you're going to have the diamonds. And I can call the methods. I am calling the draw. Makes sense, guys. Now, with this, hopefully, what is going to happen moving forward is one of the programmers, the guy that is going to do all the red things, I am done. I give you the graphical user interface. I give you this method, and my program is going to draw all your icons. I don't care the position. I don't care how many. This method is going to draw everything. It is your problem or someone else's problem, which are going to be the coordinates for the icons, or how many icons are going to be there, or implementing whatever methods are going to update the data. What about the responsibility of the programmer that is going to be working in the icons? Can we put one developer, one of you, to create the method draw for all the different icons? Because the icons are different. Some of them need bars, dots, parentheses, curly brackets, angular bracket, different things. Do you think that that one could become another thing to do for another person? To do the details of how an icon is drawn, the shadows, the draws, all the small elements, the details. Moreover, can you imagine that probably something that you're going to have is not only one class icon, but probably a family? And this icon could become an interface with this method draw, empty, and the childs are going to be the ones that are mandatory, are going to need to implement that method draw. And each of the classes is going to have a method draw that is particular for the shape of that icon. Hopefully you're following. And hopefully you are like, yeah, one person here, draw the icons, one person here, do the graphical user interface, one person with the working area. Tell me, what do we need to do in order to add one of these icons in the working area? Now we can move to the drag and drop. One option to implement drag and drop. What do we need to do in the class diagram, in the programming, in order to have drag and drop? Any idea? Someone mentioned, listen to the drop event. What I need to do in order to do that? What is the programming involved for that? Listeners, yeah. Who need the listeners? Where I can put the listeners? Two options. I can use listeners in the frame, or I can use listeners in the panels. Both things are possible. Up to you. However, whatever you do, wherever you connect the listeners, what you are going to have is which are the listeners that we need. Action listeners are very good if you're going to use labels and text fields, text areas, and those kind of widgets that already exist. You can use labels. You can move this icon to be a child of label. Everything that I show you could be the same. But when you put this icon to be a child of JLabel, automatically you can use action listeners with icon. Because icon is a label, a child of label. Option number one, if you want to use action listeners, something like this could work. Option number two, you know what? No, I do not want to work with widgets. I do not want to use labels. I want to work with these icons like use draws. Your second option is the mouse listeners. Probably your code could be more clean if you use mouse listeners. You can have control of several other things later. Mouse listener, And the only thing that you need to do here or here what is going to happen if you implement mouse listener in a class, for instance, in main? What do you need to do next after they implement mouse listener? Hopefully you agree with me that right now, what I have is the class main. Inside of the class main, I have this public, static, void, main, whatever. I have the constructor for main. And so far, here and here, I create the frame and also I create the panels and I put the panels on the screen. That is something that I already have. What is going to happen when I do in main? What is going to happen when I implement the mode listener? I do need to do something in the main to have more methods besides the static main and the constructor? If so, which ones? Override the method. Which methods? And if you're following the chat, yeah. Just because you implement mouse listener, in particular, that listener is going to give you not one method like the action performed, but several. Several, among others, the click, the drag, press, release. Every single action that could happen with the mouse. These methods are going to be called when those actions happen. What are you going to receive as a parameters for those methods? There is any parameter that you're going to receive in those methods that are important for what we are doing right now? Mouse event. You're going to receive this mouse event object. What do we have inside of that object? X and Y, exactly. One important thing, separation of concerns. The drag and drop, the view, the data, different things, different developers, different people working with different things, different methods, the method draw in icon, the method drag, click, release, whatever, one of those or several of them that you're going to use. When you call the mouse release, you have X and Y. Those X and Y could be the X and Y for an icon. In that point, you can create a new icon. Moreover, you can add that new icon in the list that you have in the working area. The only thing that you need to do is to create a new object, to add the new object to the list, and you don't care about that object. It's going to be drawn by someone else, by this method paint. The most important thing, guys, is when you are doing a piece of software, and in particular with your assignment, you should have clear idea. What is your responsibility, the responsibility of the part that you are doing, and in some point, you need to think, I do not care what happened from this point going on. My responsibility was to add the element to the list. Done. I put the element in the list. I don't care what happened for the drawing. My responsibility is doing the drawing. I don't care how or who is adding elements to the list, but my responsibility is to read the list and put the things on the screen. And so on. Here, there is what we have in this few number of classes is the icons, the working area. We can do the drag and drop work used with the mouse listener. And we are adding elements, icons to the working area. Done. Really? If you can follow my instructions, if you can implement these classes, starting now, it's just about your technical skills. But starting now, 3 people, 3 of you working together in one team can have this working in one day, can have this working before our next lecture. Yes or no? I am not asking you to submit, just asking if you think that you are capable of having this working before our next lecture. And hopefully the answer is yes. 1, 2, 3, 4 classes plus the childs of icon. And maybe you can have childs that are not exactly the same that I give to you, but 1 triangle, 1 circle, 1 rectangle, and a star or whatever. Could it be possible to have this? And my recommendation for you guys is, could you work individually to try to create this? Just to check if you understand the class diagram and the technicalities that we described today. Because if you're able to have this working in 1 day or 2 days before the next lecture, tell me, what is missing in this thing that we did today in 1 hour in order to complete your assignment? What do we need here to complete the assignment? Nothing? This is the assignment? Input and output. Next step, what we need, hopefully you agree with me. Right now, you have the panel. And in this panel, you're going to have the icons. Easy to draw them. They are not going to do anything. You're going to have a working area. And according with this, click, click, something, click, click, something, click, click, something. You're going to be able to draw these several icons in the working area. It's a linked list. The linked list have the elements. The elements are going to be drawn. Next step, connect these guys. That is something that is missing, the connection. And by the way, hopefully you have a story that is related about the connections. Hopefully you have a story that is related about adding the icons in the working area. Hopefully you have a story that is all about drawing the icons, the working area, and the menu. Did you notice the stories and the task connected with the technicalities? And a second thing, once I have the connections, the last requirement, another story that hopefully you have is all about what? Do you remember? The last element in the menu is something that is compiled, something that is check that the connections are correct, that all the connections exist and all the icons are connected somehow. That more or less cover everything that you need for the assignment. So if you can finish this, what we described today, alone or even with your team, if you can make this work, at least a draft, and I can explain to you ideas about how to implement these too, we can finish in 2 lectures your assignment. However, you have 2 weeks. yeah, a lot of details and a lot of fancy things are not described in my draft. But at least recommendation number one, three people that could have worked. At least know what to do, how to start, how to connect with the others. Details, Java documentation, and so on. You have time to include that. Help me just to finish with this. Do you have any idea about how we can solve the problem of the connections? Do you have any idea what could be the approach, the technical approach for handling connection between the nodes? What could we do in the technical part? What could we do in the program? Do we need more classes than the ones that I described before? Crazy things, crazy libraries or something? Or is just the algorithm that we need to define? Ideas for the connections. Did you notice that the connections are basically a data structure? Could you notice the similarity between what I am asking you to do and a data structure graph? Have you implemented a data structure graph? Can we create a class graph? Which are the elements inside? Which variables do I need to handle a data structure graph? Which methods? As any data structure, hopefully you can agree with me, this data structure is going to have add, remove, and probably traversal. Some way to visit all the nodes. Some way to add nodes. Some way to remove nodes. What about the attributes? Which attributes do we need in a data structure graph? Do you remember? Did you review this before? Tell me, no or yes? No. Could you agree with me that this idea of nodes is our class icon? But do you suggest that we need a class for the lines and we need a class for the graph? Two more classes. And what I have here is another programmer. We can review the details, but programmer number 4. What do you think about compile? What is compile? What do we need to do for compiling? According with the storyboard, what I asked you to do, that is the meaning for compiling. I do not understand the question. What we are doing with the inputs and the connections? You have the icons and they should be able to be connected. The goal, the background is you are doing programming because each icon represents a loop or a condition or a method. When we connect, my goal, next assignment is that is the graphical representation of a problem. But it's not relevant right now. Right now it's just a graph. Tell me, what is this compile? The compile is to review that everything is connected correctly. Any idea about how you can implement that? What do you need to implement that? Do we need something in the graphical user interface, or is something that is going to happen just inside with the data structure, maybe with the graph class, traversal? This method traversal in particular is going to be this compile functionality. And you know what? It's going to be particularly complex. 5 programmers. 1 programmer for doing that. Professor, wait. You are telling me that 1 programmer is going to do the class graph. And therefore that programmer is going to be working in this file. But now you are telling me that it could be a good idea that another programmer is going to do the method traversal or compile. So are they both going to be working in the same class? They are going to be working in the same file? Hopefully not, because I mentioned that that was a bad idea. So they should be working in different classes. Each of them should be working in its own file, its own class. So you're going to have two classes. And this is the class graph. And another class. What do you do? I am talking about patterns. When you have a class that is too complex to be developed or to be handled in one file, and you need to split that one in more than one class, do you remember the pattern that we can apply here just to move traversal outside of the class graph? Because if we remember the pattern, the only thing that we need to do is to apply the pattern and start working. Pattern to move outside of a class a particular sub-functionality. Ideas? So applying the same. Two components, and this component is doing a particular sub-work or sub-functionality from this one, which is the relationship between these two. Delegation pattern, delegate. Basically, the idea is you have a class and some work is too hard for me to do it. What I am going to do is to delegate that work in another object from another class. Delegation pattern is as simple as this, an aggregation. This is the boss. This is the employee. And I am the boss. I am the one that have a method traversal, but the only thing that I am going to do in my method traversal is to call the method traversal in my employee. I am delegating the responsibility. Hopefully this helped. I split your project in 5 programmers. I try to split your project in 5 different actions, in 5 different group of tasks. And more or less, I try to keep those 5 with the balance. This is only one method, the compile. However, it's a complex method. All the graphical user interface is a lot of classes, a bunch of connections, but however, that is very simple to do. Hopefully you agree with that. So take a look to this and we continue in the next lecture. Any question before I finish? Okay, guys, see you next lecture. Review this. We continue later. Thank you.